My name is Aniket Kambli, and I'm currently working at Udgama as a member of technical staff. So I'm currently working as a full stack developer. On front end, I work on React, and on back end, I work on Hasura specifically and on AWS. The topic that I would be discussing with you all today is, so I understand that can be a bit overwhelming if you read that everything in one go. So the first part is what? So what are we going to talk about today? So that is automating Slack messages. So this part should be like self-explanatory. Now, the second part, which is how are we going to do it? So, in order to do it, we are going to use Hasura's cron scheduler and Hasura's event triggers. So, you might be asking, like, what is Hasura's cron scheduler or what is Hasura's event trigger? So, in the next slide, I will be covering both of these in detail. So, currently, just imagine like we are going to do it using Hasura's cron scheduler and Hasura's event trigger. Next is why. So why there is a need to automate the Slack messages. So like you must be knowing like after COVID, a lot of people have started working from home. So there are some people which are working from home. There are some people which are working from office, and there are some people which are like working from anywhere. So in order to improve this team collaboration, in order to improve the communication between the team, and also to streamline workflows, that is to simplify the processes in the organization by automating one part of it. So that is why we are going to automate the Slack messages. So I hope you have understood like the topic or what are we going to do in this particular session. So we will like spend couple of minutes on understanding what is Hasura's cron scheduler or what are Hasura's event triggers. So the first part would be event trigger. So like I said in the beginning, if you want to understand anything, just break it into different small parts. So event triggers, something that is going to be triggered on a particular event. That is nothing but an event trigger. Talking in Hasura's context, so in Hasura, it has an inbuilt feature of like event triggers. So event could be an insert to your database, it could be an update to your database, it could be a delete event to your database. So whenever something happens to a particular table in your database, something is going to be triggered. That something can be a webhook, it can be an API URL. So those are basically event triggers. Whenever an event is happening, it is going to trigger something. The next is cron scheduler. So you must have heard a lot about like what are cron jobs. So cron jobs are basically a piece of code, and it could be anything that is going to run in certain intervals of time. So it could be every minute, every week, every day, every year. So something which is going to be repeated again and again. So that is Asura's cron scheduler. Along with that, there is also one specific concept which I like a lot. So that is like Hasura's on-off schedule event. So like cron scheduler is there. So cron scheduler is used for repeating the task again and again. On the other hand, on-off schedule events, so like the name is like the name explains. So it is basically one event that is going to be fired only once. And once that event is fired, then it is done. It is not going to be fired again and again. So these are the three important concepts that are necessary for understanding the today's topic that I would be explaining. The next is, like I said, the need for improving communication to streamline workflows. So the first is efficient information exchange. So like in order for other people to understand what you're thinking, well, you have to tell it to them. So in order to tell it to them, you can send them a Slack message, you can give them a call, you can give them a MS Teams message, and so on. Enhanced problem solving. So there is a like a famous quote, there is no I in team. So whenever you're working in a team or whenever you're working on a project, in order to solve a problem, there has to be efficient communication. Without communication, a big problem cannot be solved. So let's say there are a lot of people who are working on a project. So when you are communicating with each other, you are basically brainstorming your ideas, you are putting out your own ideas, you are hearing others opinions, and then finally coming to a conclusion. So that is why communication between colleagues is necessary. So building trust and engagement, like without talking to people, you cannot understand them. Without hearing their thoughts, you cannot understand them. So in order to better understand each other, in order to build a trust, in order to build a relationship with your colleague or with the people that you're working with, communication is necessary. Yeah. So I know this diagram can be a bit overwhelming. Yeah. So this is going to be the architecture that we would be talking about today. The first one is AWS's CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is basically a monitoring service that is provided by AWS in order to see what is going on in your AWS account. Next would be the AWS's Lambda function. So Lambda function are basically serverless piece of code that are going to be run on well servers, but where these servers are present, so you don't have to care about it. The next is Amazon's DynamoDB. So Amazon's DynamoDB is basically their NoSQL database, which is like used by them in order to like store the data which is not structured. The next would be Amazon's S3 bucket. So S3 bucket is a blob storage which is used for storing files, or it can be used for storing your log files or your other data. So I really hope that you have understood this particular flowchart. For the people who have not understood, let me just simplify it. That is it. So that is everything that you need to understand in order to understand the today's topic. So you can forget about the previous diagram. So I was just like messing with you guys. So that is not the thing that we are going to be talking about today. So this is the only thing that you need to understand. So the first one is API gateway. So API gateway is AWS's version of REST API. So REST as in representational state transfer. So this API gateway is responsible for invoking a Lambda function. So Lambda function, like I said, so it is a serverless function which runs a piece of code. And finally, the Slack. So Slack you must be all aware of. So Slack is basically used for like communicating with each other or collaborating with each other, and so on. So where is Hasura going to come in this picture? So Hasura would be something somewhere over here. So Hasura is going to call my API gateway. So when it is going to call it, so I will tell Hasura that okay, so at today at 8 p.m. you should call API gateway. So that part is called as scheduling an event. So I will be telling Hasura to schedule an event at a particular time. Then Hasura at that particular time is going to call my API gateway. So like I said, API gateway is basically a REST endpoint. So whenever Hasura is calling my API gateway, that API gateway is going to trigger a Lambda function. And this Lambda function is going to be responsible for sending the message in Slack. So when you see the demo, so it is going to be like quite easy to understand. So currently, you can think of this entire box as a black box. So you don't have to care what is going on internally. All you care about is it, you are going to schedule a message in Hasura, and that message has to be delivered to Slack. What happens in between? So leave that to me. So I'm responsible for coding all that logic. So you just have to focus about scheduling your message. So like that is what we want from the end user. So end user doesn't care whether we use Hasura or whether we use some other tool for sending the message. The end user is only going to care about I am scheduling a message at this particular time. It has to be sent to Slack. That is all. So enough of talking. I will just like show you live how it works. So this is the Hasura console or the Hasura project which is deployed on the Hasura's cloud. So currently in my database, I just have two tables which are schedule message, which is for sending a message only once, and there is one more table which is schedule cron message. So schedule cron message, so like I said, cron, so it is going to repeatedly send the messages in Slack after a particular interval. Next you need to understand is about the event triggers. So like I said in the beginning, so event triggers are basically whenever an event is happening in my database, so at that time what is going to be triggered, so that I have configured over here. So if you want to create your own event trigger, you can always create one. So while creating a trigger, you can give it a name. You can select, first you will have to select the schema, then you will have to select the table. Before that you will have to select the database. So right now there are two tables in my public schema. Yeah. So I can tell Hasura that okay, so if there is an insert or update or delete on my AW on my database, then you are going to call this particular endpoint. So these are the two events that I have scheduled, event triggers that I have created. So let me just schedule a new message. So in order to schedule a new message, I will just have to insert it into my table. So let's say, so it is currently 1843 right now. So I'm scheduling a message for 1844. So whenever you're scheduling a message, so you can automatically see that message in the pending events. So this event has been created by my Lambda function. So whenever I'm creating an event trigger in my Hasura, so at that time I'm telling Hasura, so okay, so whenever an insert is happening into my database, call that Lambda function. And that Lambda function, it runs a piece of code. That piece of code is responsible for scheduling an event back in Hasura. And once that event has been scheduled, so that event again calls my another Lambda function, which is responsible for sending the message in Slack. So some of you might have seen that I have got a message. So that was me like trying and testing. So at 1844, I got a message from my app saying that hello from Hasura Con, which is 2023. So that is how it works. So it is very simple. So there are two Lambda functions. One is responsible for creating an event in Hasura. Another one is responsible for sending the actual Slack message. So it might be a difficult to understand, but you can like rewatch the video again and then understand it. So this was the first part, which was scheduling an on-off message or scheduling a single message. The second one is scheduling a cron message. So cron message is even easier. So what I'm doing while scheduling a cron message is that, so this is the format of the cron string. So this is like the global format. If you want to know more about it, you can visit crontab.guru, and here you can create the cron string that you want. So cron string basically when I want the message to be repeated. So whether I want it to be repeated every minute, whether I want it to be repeated, let's say every day, every week, every month. So whatever it is, so you can create your own custom cron string, and then depending on that you can add it to the database. So right now I have created one cron event which is going to be repeated every minute. So in the trigger, so as you can see, a new trigger has been created, and this trigger is going to be run each and every minute. So after every minute I'm going to get a message in my Slack. So it is at 1846, then it would be at 1847, 48, 49, and so on. So it is going to keep on repeating until I stop it. So another pro tip would be don't create a cron scheduler for each and every minute. So what this is doing, it is calling my Lambda function each and every minute. So the number of execution of my Lambda function increases, so automatically the cost would also increase. So that is why if you're doing trial and testing, that is okay, but once you are done with it, always make sure to delete that trigger. If you don't do it, it is going to call the Lambda function again and again. So since right now I have deleted the cron trigger, so it won't be sending messages anymore. So that was the first one, was about on off schedule event. The next one that I showed right now was about the cron trigger. We are also internally using Hasura for our own product development. So just let me talk about like for a couple of minutes how we use Hasura. So we have our own product which is called as Team Plus. So it currently has different features like time offs, polls, stand up, shout out, and schedule messages. So our entire backend is based on Hasura, and this schedule messages is specifically the feature that is using Hasura's cron scheduler, or it is using Hasura's event triggers as well as Hasura's on off schedule events. So it has like a lot of different features. So some of the features to talk about would be, yeah. So right now you saw that I scheduled a message for a particular channel. So similarly, if you can use like the Team Plus's front end, and you can schedule the message for a particular employee. You can schedule the message for teams. You can choose whether the message pattern should be once or whether it should be recurring. So if it is once, then it is going to use the on off schedule event. If it is recurring, then it is going to use the cron event. So if the pattern is recurring, so then you can configure like when it has to be repeated. So whether it has to be repeated daily, every work day, weekly, monthly, or yearly. Also, you can create your own categories for the schedule messages. If you want to like know more about our product, or if you want to know how we are using Asura for the product development in Team Plus, then you can like visit udyama.com/Team Plus and then sign up for our product and start using the different features. So let us trigger those Slack messages and schedule our way to success. So thank you so much guys for listening to me.